You don't have to choose to repair every conflict. Some conflicts will never be repaired, but most conflicts, especially interpersonal ones, can absolutely be repaired. A few weeks ago, when I first thought of this talk topic, I was watching a movie called The Five People You Meet in Heaven. Anybody heard of that? It's a kind of old. But long story short is the star of the movie finds all of the answers in heaven from the five people he meets there after he dies. And basically, these are the five people who were the most consequential to him in his lifetime. And in dialogue with them, he realizes that he really was loved and valued and worthy. So he works all this out in heaven. It's a pretty decent movie and a better book, I understand. It's from the author of Tuesdays with Morrie. I forgot the author's name. But I decided that this movie was spiritually somewhat false for me. I am not sure if in heaven you get to have conversations with people and that's the time to work through your conflict and your resolutions with everyone. I'm not sure if heaven works like that. Maybe none of us can be sure. Well, our guest speaker, Anita Morjani, in February, has been to the other side, so she can maybe give us some wisdom there. But to me, we were put on earth right here, right now, to work things out in this place. And even if our loved one or friend has passed on, I believe that you can work through the emotions. You can still have conversations with that person's soul between worlds. But one of the reasons why Myrtle Fillmore, our co-founder, called life a school, and Unity was and is a school, is that this place is where you get to work things out. Not only as you continue to remember each and every day more and more your divine identity, but you get to work out your remembrance of others as being divine as well. So that's what my talk is about today. I find it noteworthy that so much of spirituality is about God and you and God and your power and your stillness and your thoughts and your prayers and your meditation and your relationship with God and your realization and your remembrance. But seeing your relationship with God as being expressed and cultivated and nurtured through other people as earth angels, as emanations of God, is absolutely necessary. I remember it's either I think it's a Hawaiian or of that region. I forgot the name of all those islands. There's a tale of the human race is like a big canoe, and we're all sharing in this space. And this is a kind of a motif, a metaphor for we all have to get along. We all have to interact with each other. And especially as we're slowly coming out of the pandemic, we're going to be interacting more and more and more with people. The relationship therapist John Gottman says, conflict is inevitable in every relationship. It's inevitable. And I don't think he just meant love relationships. And it sometimes comes in the form of people that are difficult. And this reminded me of a story that I told when I first started here a couple of years ago. Pema Chodron has a student named Gurdjieff, and she tells this story about Gurdjieff, and I'm going to read this briefly. Gurdjieff had a spiritual community. There was a man in his community who was really bad-tempered. Nobody could stand this guy because he was so prickly. Every little thing caused him to spin off into a tantrum. Everything irritated this guy. He complained constantly, so everyone felt the need to tippy-toe around him because anything that might be said could cause him to explode. People just wished he would go away. The teacher, Gurdjieff, liked to make his students do things that were completely meaningless at times. One day, there were about 40 people within this community. They were told to cut up the lawn into little pieces and move it from one side of the yard all the way to the other for no reason. This was, well, I'm sure they had their reasons. This was just too much for this irritable student. It was the last straw. He blew up, he stormed out, he got in his car, drove off, whereupon there was spontaneous celebration from within the community. People were thrilled, so happy that he had gone. But when they told the teacher, Gurdjieff, what had happened, Gurdjieff said, "Oh no!" And he got in his car and he drove and he went after him. 3 days later, they both came back. That night, when the teacher, Gurdjieff's attendant, was serving him supper, the attendant said, "Sir, why did you bring this guy back?" And Gurdjieff answered in a very low voice, "You're not going to believe this. And this is just between you and me. You must tell no one. But I pay him to stay here." So I think, well, first of all, have you known such a person? Has there been such a person in your life that has been that irritable fellow that you would celebrate when they left the room? I think in any large community, there may be such people to varying degrees. And I think the takeaway of the story is that difficult people have a gift for you, or people when they're being difficult. Maybe the people that you love the most, when they're being difficult, it represents an opportunity for spiritual growth. So everyone is in your life to help you. Everything is a gift. And if you look at things through that lens, it can make conflict very interesting. So in difficult situations with others, we can treat it as an opportunity to ask ourselves, how can we react or respond in a way that acknowledges the God in me as well as the God in them, otherwise known as namaste consciousness, right? And again, the caveat to this whole talk is there may be situations where disengaging from the person is the best course of all. You know when it's good to walk away for your own good. But I'm not talking about those situations. So I'm going to share some skills for conflict resolution. And there are people in this community who probably know some of these very well, or have even given workshops on conflict resolution. So this is certainly just one window into this world. And I'm going to share some wisdom from a psychologist, a relationship psychologist, and a spiritual leader. The first is a powerful set of suggestions for conflict resolutions by the renowned relationship therapist John Gottman, who I quoted earlier, which can be applied to almost any kind of relationship. And John Gottman says, first of all, be aware of the 4 horsemen of the relationship apocalypse. And even though these were developed for marriage counseling, I believe that these 4 horsemen can be about just any kind of relationship. So the first horseman of the apocalypse is criticism. This can vary from little subtle jabs to very obvious criticism. And I grew up in a household where this was the norm. I didn't even know that it was not normal until much later. The insidious, subtle nature of this and the damage that it can do is just profound. So I would say, regarding criticism, don't make a mental list of someone else's errors. Don't keep score, because this comes from a consciousness of wanting to be right. You keep score because you want to prove that person wrong and you're right. The second horseman of the apocalypse is contempt. So contempt goes much further than criticism. With contempt, you are basically painting that person's entire being as wrong. You've sentenced and sent that person to trial. You've convicted that person. That person is bad. And maybe you are relatively good, relatively superior to that person. And that person has no chance anymore. You hold that person in contempt. The third horseman of the apocalypse is defensiveness. And this isn't just kind of your standard, okay, I did this because of this, but it's defending and defending and defending your viewpoint until you are not seeing the other person's viewpoint. And you may be indirectly blaming the other person by doing so, sometimes not taking enough responsibility for your own actions. The next horseman of the apocalypse is stonewalling. And stonewalling ranges from talk to the hand to a much more subtle but serious form of stonewalling that goes like this. I think you get it. It's silence. And that's why this stone wall is a great metaphor for what's happening. You have closed yourself off to the other person. You're closing yourself off to any possibilities of repair or resolution. Stonewalling is actually a place where some people start in conflict, but most often it's after they go through these other steps: criticism, contempt, defensiveness, where they end up with finally they give up in the end, and all they have is left is silence. And all of these together can lead to what John Gottman, I think he calls it the well of resentment. So imagine all of the scorekeeping, all of the defensiveness, all of the I'm right and you're wrong, all of the lists of what that person is doing. Before you even walk into the room, the well of resentment is full. Even if you're going into a work meeting, you've got a conflict with a colleague or a friend or your life partner. And when the well is full, there's very little chance that something is going to get resolved. So it's that resentment that we need to reduce. A next concept from John Gottman is what he calls soften your startup. Because he says how a conversation starts predicts how it will end. So John Gottman says if you go in straight for the jugular, you're either going to get war or retreat. One of those two, because it puts that person on the defensive right away. So here are some suggestions. Simple ones. One is to take some responsibility at the outset. I share some responsibility in this, right? Because normally in any kind of serious conflict, there is normally or quite often a two-way street. Next is start with I instead of you. Avoid you, because when you say you often end up saying you did this and you did that and you did this. But when you say I, you can say things like I feel. So you're acknowledging what's true for you, right? When I say I felt hurt when you did that, I felt disappointed when you did that, no one can argue with that because that's your truth. And that's a really good place to start, because when you say, and when you did that to me, you're right back in the blame game. Final piece of wisdom from John Gottman is compromise. Be ready to compromise. Is there a possible way where you can meet halfway, or if you can walk that line towards meeting 20% versus 80% instead of 0 and 100, right? And if you noticed, I was just thinking last night, what's a place where compromise is necessary? Capitol Hill. What perfect example of two sides that are more entrenched, Democrats and Republicans, holding each other in contempt, criticizing each other, stonewalling each other. There's no trust, but the only thing they have left is compromise. You can see it happening now, like it or not, but even within the same party, right? There are factions within the same party where they're having to compromise. It's often it's often a wise choice. So I have a few additional ideas for conflict resolution that come from Michael Beckwith from his book, Spiritual Liberation. And he says in the beginning of the book, he talks about spiritually evolved people. And he says that spiritually evolved people, he used the term race to be the first to forgive. They want to be the first to forgive. And he says this: the resistance to forgiving is an attachment to the need to be right. The power of forgiveness is liberating because it removes obstructions to the flow of good in your life. And I believe the same thing is true of saying, I'm sorry. Michael Beckwith didn't say this, but I believe that spiritually evolved people want to be the first to say, I'm sorry, regardless of paying attention to I'm right or I'm wrong. Because it really is a game changer when one person breaks that energetic anger and goes to I'm sorry or I forgive you. It completely changes the energy. Finally, Michael Beckwith talks about, at the end of his book, this whole chapter on minding your spiritual manners while here on planet Earth. And one of the ones that he says is the most important, he calls it the heart of spiritual manners, is respect. And he has this to say: respect is the recognition that all beings, all that exists, is sourced by the infinite and therefore imbued with its essence. When we consciously realize this, we treat ourselves, others, Mother Nature, and even seemingly inanimate objects with respect. So everything is alive. The respect for God's creation reverberates in every corner of the cosmos. He goes on to say that if our respect is motivated by fear, it's just that. It's just fear. So true respect is one of the highest expressions of love. The art of respecting begins with self-respect, and that self-respect generates respect for others. When genuine respect wells up in our hearts, even if we are not able to verbalize it to another person, they can feel its vibration. Respect is that powerful. I love that writing on respect. That's towards the end. That's page 200 of Spiritual Liberation. So I hope that at least one of these conflict resolution ideas has resonated with you, whether it be avoiding the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, criticizing, contempt, defensiveness, stonewalling, or whether it's using soft opening statements such as I instead of you, or whether it's compromising or rushing to be the first to forgive or say I'm sorry. I hope you found one of these helpful. I'll end today with a very short prayer from page 11 of Spiritual Liberation. This is from Michael Beckwith. Make me patient when I worry. Make me calm when there is strife. Make me loving when my heart is hardened. Make me forgiving when I would be right. For this awareness and for everything, I'm so grateful, and so it is.
Here's my heart, God. Here's my heart, God. Here's my heart, God. Speak what is true. Here's my heart, God. Here's my heart, God. Here's my heart, God. Speak what is true. 'Cause I am found, I am yours, I am love, I'm made pure. I am healed. I am free. Here's my heart, God. Here's my heart, God. Here's my heart, God. Speak what is true. Here's my heart, God. Here's my heart, God. Here's my heart, God. Speak what is true. 'Cause you are strong, you are sure, you are life, you endure, you are good, always true, you are light, breaking through. Here's my heart, Lord. Here's my heart, Lord. Here's my heart, Lord. Speak what is true. Speak what is true. Speak what is true.
Get comfortable in your seat. Close your eyes if you are comfortable doing so, or you can focus on that beautiful landscape on the screen. Becoming aware of your breath, gently inhale and exhale, feeling the air enter and exit your body. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Have you ever noticed how the simplest things fill us with wonder? The splendor of nature, a sunrise or sunset, the breeze on our skin, the fresh smell of rain, the taste of a perfectly ripe piece of fruit. As we look upon the world with a sense of wonder, we realize we are immersed in the presence of God, and we smile, knowing Spirit is everywhere present, working through us, reminding us we are surrounded by miracles. What fills you with wonder? Breathe that in. Take this feeling of wonder into your heart as we go into the silence. Coming back to the present, we say thank you, Spirit, for these moments of peace, grace, and wonder. We know all is well, and so it is, my friends.